Hey everybody, week 17 COVID updates coming at you this week. Happy Friday. Hope this video message finds you well. I want to talk about three things this week. Number one, want to shout out James Ford and the rest of the state board members of education in North Carolina for helping push more equitable social studies standards. Based upon our understanding, they won't be going into effect next year, but the ball is moving down the field in the right progression, if you will. And so I want to shout out them for lifting up the inequities of the current standards and also the importance of why more equitable standards matter for all students in North Carolina. And hopefully that can be an example for others, state boards of education across the state as well. So kudos to you guys. Number two, about school reentry, as it's becoming more apparent with number of COVID cases increasing and on the rise, it's making it more and more challenging to see schools going back and reopening under normal situations, and seems quite scary if they do, to be very frank with you all. And so, in many states like North Carolina and others where cases are going up, there's way more confirmed cases now than what there were in March when schools were released. And so the argument to go back seems a bit short-sighted, number one, at least in a traditional sense, going back in a traditional sense. And then number two, if we do force a reopening and a normal reopening and no hybrid learning at all, if more students contract COVID, and if it spreads or if just staff contracted as well and then are out or have to be quarantined for 14 days, that's going to cause a massive disruption in learning, in creating standards and lesson plans and assessments, and really just the flow of school as we previously knew it. And so again, all these kind of factors combined seems like it continues to make a lot of sense. So if nothing else, start with a hybrid model where students are going to school in person less often, or just starting 100% completely remote, making sure health concerns are eradicated and that cases are going down, and then slowly and gradually build to allowing more students and adults back into the building. It's becoming more apparent to us that makes the most sense. And the school districts that are out in front doing this well, the ones that are taking that approach. And then lastly, related to school reentry, we're going to shout out Montgomery County schools in Maryland. And so they've come up with really a process, but it makes sense, something we've talked about, a lot of other people have talked about before, not necessarily related to school reentry, but related to other aspects, is to test it. And so whatever districts think their best plan is of what day one of school is going to look like, they should literally get the principals of that said school, or a few schools, a few of the staff members that are able to come back, and literally test it, walk through from 7:15 to 2:15, or whenever the first bell and the last bell rings, walk through the expected day-to-day procedures of what's possible and what's not. And this is a common practice around testing or prototyping in many sectors, sometimes in education, but maybe not as much as it should be. But just literally test everything from the time a student is picked up on the bus, to when they arrive, to when they get their temperature checked, to how they're transitioning in the hallways, to how they're going to pick up their food in the cafeteria or in the classroom. Like, literally test all of these things, see what's feasible and see what's not, and allow that to really guide your school reentry plans. And so, we think that's a really good idea. It makes a lot of sense. It's not something we've explicitly talked about before on these video updates or in relation to school reentry, but it's something we've talked about in our previous examples of our work and things we try to bake into our work. Is just testing and prototyping what we think in theory makes sense until you actually do it. And many times over, a lot of surprises, good and bad, come up as you're actually testing it. So we think that testing makes a lot of sense, and we encourage a lot of you all to do that. But we still can't advocate enough for gaining insights and expertise from your educators, from your principals, and most importantly from your families and your parents that you serve. Something we've been pounding a lot in our messaging and communication to our partners and those we serve, but also others. This is going to be a year unlike any other in terms of schools. Having buy-in, having communication, and having those parents and educators at the decision-making table will go a long way for so many of us. So we hope that helps. Again, shout out to the State Board of North Carolina for pushing more equitable social studies standards. Number two, be really clear about health concerns and how and if we should go back to school. And then number three, encourage you all to test it. So your school leaders, district soups out there, really begin to test and walk through a day and practice what this might look like. I think a lot of surprises, both good and bad, will arise and emerge as that testing day happens. We hope that helps. Have a good weekend. See you.